Good afternoon, everyone. How is everybody doing? Well, it's that time of year. It's hurricane season. We've been pretty lucky through the first half of the year so far to really avoid any of these tropical systems in Florida. But unfortunately, definitely looks like that streak is going to come to an end. As you can see here on our screen, Hurricane Ian churning to the north right now at 10 miles per hour, packing 115 mile per hour winds, which have come down a little bit from this morning. When I went to bed about 6 o'clock this morning, it was right around 120, 125. But some land interaction with Cuba, as you can see, the storm passed over Cuba as it moves to the north, have sort of weakened the storm ever so slightly. However, there's a lot of warm water over this section of the Gulf of Mexico that should allow for Ian to re-intensify back up into the 120s. And I believe, I haven't really taken a look at it, we'll look at it together, but last time I looked, it was expected to be a 140 mile an hour Cat 4 hurricane. Really, really powerful storm in the making here, if that's still the case. Now, central pressure is about 961 millibars. If I remember correctly, that's come up ever so slightly from this morning. Again, that land interaction will do that. Land is sort of a hurricane's worst enemy when it comes to these things. There's no water for it to draw energy from. The land sort of slows the winds down due to friction. Mountains can sort of deteriorate the low-level circulation of the storm. There's a lot that goes on in these hurricanes that can get disrupted by land. Now, you can see right now the current location is 305 miles southwest of Sarasota. Sarasota's right here. So yes, the storm is 305 miles away, but look at these spiraling outer bands already making their way into parts of south central Florida onto the west coast. Sarasota is already probably getting some rain from these outer bands. Hard to really tell. The radars are a little bit farther away. So some of this might not be actually reaching the ground, but needless to say, look at these large spiraling outer bands moving through Miami. You see we have some special marine warnings out there, potential for some water spouts out there in these bands that are sitting out here. Tropical storm force wind gusts are, I would say, possible in these farthest outer bands. I would say they're very likely in this group of banding here. And then once you start getting into here is when you start getting into the hurricane force winds. So you can see this storm it's a very large system, and the impactful winds go out a decent amount from the center of the storm. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a quick look at the National Hurricane Center. Sort of what the cone looks like here. 1 second to pull this up. All right, we're going to use a different map. It's a little bit easier to sort of zoom in on locations on a different map. I apologize, I can see the video jumping a little bit. Haven't recorded on this computer for a while, and it seems to not like it as I run these softwares with it. So hopefully it's not too messed up in the final product. But you see the center here, these radiuses are different wind fields. So the 34 knot wind field would be your essentially tropical storm force winds. The 50 knot wind field is sort of weak hurricane or just below hurricane. And then you have your 64 knot, which is your hurricane force. Now, if we look at the track here, again, I know you hear it all the time when we talk about these tropical systems, right? Don't just focus on where the cone is. The impacts will be far outside the cone, especially if you're on the right front side of this thing. Now, let's click at this point and see here. So, 8 a.m. tomorrow, we're expecting 130 mile per hour, gusting to 160, category 4? See, folks, even meteorologists sometimes get lost in all the jargon and the necessary components to reach certain thresholds. Regardless, a very powerful hurricane. 130 miles an hour is nothing to sneeze at, that's for sure. That is 8 a.m. tomorrow. Now, you go forward in time again. Look at this. Between 8 a.m. and I would assume, yes, 8 p.m. tomorrow, storms only move that far. This thing is really going to slow down as it makes landfall. It's moving north right now at 10 miles per hour. That forward motion is expected. That forward motion is expected to slow down dramatically once it hits land. This thing is going to be over the Florida Peninsula for a few days, unfortunately. Now, we'll talk about what that means impacts-wise in a little bit, but let's keep going through here. So, we're expecting landfall 8 p.m. roughly tomorrow. Now, yes, landfall 8 p.m., but you're going to be getting those hurricane-force winds wherever it makes landfall, and currently somewhere south, just south or within Tampa Bay looks like the most likely location for this. Sarasota is probably, if you're gonna pick a spot. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of coffee here real quick. If you're gonna pick a spot, Sarasota is certainly an area to watch. Tampa, but anywhere essentially along this area is going to be seeing hurricane force winds, especially areas like Port Charlotte, Sarasota, St. Petersburg, Tampa, Clearwater. These areas are to be hammered for hours with high-end tropical storm to hurricane force winds. It's going to be nothing to sneeze at. The storm surge is going to be, there's going to be a lot of water. We'll talk more about that. I'm going to get ahead of myself here. The impacts are going to be quite profound. Now, you see 8 p.m. Now watch this. 8 a.m. In 12 hours, the storm has probably moved farther than you could probably run in 12 hours. It's probably crawling along at 3 to 4 miles per hour here. But during this time, it is going to weaken. It's expected to still be a hurricane 48 hours from now. As it sort of comes over the land. There's a few things I want to talk about before it makes landfall that'll impact the strength at landfall. However, looking at this, an 85 mile per hour hurricane inland, if you believe the forecast track, right near Lakeland, Florida. Almost right along that I-4 corridor. You could be driving on I-4 tomorrow and potentially see, or not tomorrow, but 2 days from now, and potentially have the eye of a hurricane pass over you. I mean, how incredible would that be? But again, this is just, when the storm is moving this slow, really any deviation within this cone is especially likely. That is why you see this cone get so big out past 24 hours. When this thing slows down, minute impacts can change where the storm is going to go a great deal. It could end up all the way out in the Atlantic, or it could end up back in the Gulf at some point. It's remains to be seen. We don't exactly have a great idea. I thought about showing maybe some model data on. Excuse me. Thought about maybe showing some model data. However, the models are a bit convoluted with this storm. They're a little tough to look at, and I don't want to just use sort of an ensemble model to show things, because there's a lot of minute details here that I need to cover, and I think if I show that, people can kind of focus on what one model is showing compared to the other, and that's not what I want. So we look at 60 hours from now, 8 p.m. on the 29th, which is 2 days from now. So Thursday. We're looking at the center of the storm somewhere in Central Florida, most likely somewhere in Central Florida. Could be near Melbourne, could be back in the Gulf, Hermosa Springs, Spring Hill. It's possible. Could be over Ocala. But again, look how slow this thing is moving in 12 hours. And look at this, it slows down even more. However, by this point, we are looking at a tropical storm. It's going to continue to weaken, although because Florida Peninsula has water on both sides, the storm might not weaken as quickly as it would if it moved inland, say, into Alabama or North Carolina. It's still drawing energy from both sides, sort of the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf at the same time. So it's not going to weaken incredibly quickly. So you could be seeing some very intense wind gusts through Daytona, Deltona, Ocala, Gainesville, Palm Coast, the south side of the Jacksonville metro area. Could be seeing hurricane force wind gusts with this thing come, when was this point again? 8 a.m. on the 30th, so Friday. The storm is, if you live in the state of Florida, you're going to see some impacts from this, unless maybe you're far out in the Panhandle, which I had a question about. I'll get to that in a little bit. Now, the good thing is once it gets to this point, there's sort of some upper level steering mechanics that are really going to say, hey, you need to accelerate off to the north and get out of here, right? Which is what we want. We do not want this thing hanging around. So we saw 8 a.m. on Friday, and then we have 8 a.m. on Saturday. Yeah, we've moved a great deal there. It's not exceptionally fast, probably looking 7 to 8 to 9 miles per hour. It's nothing crazy, but it's forward motion, which is what we want. We don't want it sitting over, the same area for hours. And look at this, it's still a tropical storm at this point. I mean, how incredible is that? This thing's been over land for 3 days at that point, and it's still a tropical storm. It's really remarkable how this thing's going to sort of hold on to its intensity. Now, speaking of that intensity, though, I guess I'll pull up the radar again just to give you a simple look at while I talk about this. Off in this area of the Gulf of Mexico, there's a lot of wind shear aloft, and that is going to hinder Ian ever so slightly right before it makes landfall. You saw once it gets about to this point, we're looking at potentially 130, 140 mile per hour hurricane. When it makes landfall, those winds are expected to be around 120, 125 miles per hour. Now, because of that upper level wind shear, there's some dynamics within the storm that get messed up that will sort of raise the central pressure and lower the winds. Now, part of that is hurricanes like to be very vertically stacked. They do not like to be tilted at all. So what wind shear is you have different wind speed and direction aloft than you do at the surface. So what happens is the center of the storm could be here at the low level. But because of that wind shear, it's tilted aloft. And that's not great for the way hurricanes like to operate. They're a well-oiled machine. They like to have a certain set of dynamics happening within them. And if it gets thrown off, they can't reach their peak intensity. And that's what's going to happen here with Ian. Now, 120 mile per hour hurricane at landfall, especially on the west coast with these low-lying areas and all these bays in here, is nothing to sneeze at all. And it's going to be, that's why there's hurricane warnings all the way from the Big Bend area down through Cape Coral, down through South Florida near the Everglades. It's going to be the amount of water that is going to be sort of, let's see, do they have a storm surge graphic here? Let's see. Yes, peak surge. Let's take a look at this real quick. Also, if you will excuse me 1 second, I'm going to plug in my computer. This is what happens when you do videos on the fly, folks. I apologize for not doing more of these. It's been a little difficult to sort of manage with working and whatnot, but my day off today. So now, like I was talking about with the surge, this is an experimental product. National Hurricane Center is experimenting with this to see how it works. But you can see in the area where Ian is supposed to make landfall, 8 to 12 feet of storm surge. 8 to 12 feet. I want you to think about this. Look up at your ceiling. Most ceilings are 9 to 10 feet tall. That is taller than your ceiling. That is a lot of water. That's a lot of water that's going to be pushed inland. So the coastal flooding from Tampa could be spared from the worst, but 5 to 8 feet is still nothing to sneeze about. The sort of east and southward shift in the track over the last few days. Initially, it had it coming almost right into Tampa. Now it's a little bit south. That's going to save Tampa just based on the wind direction as the storm makes landfall. Initially, you had a lot of wind blowing water directly into the Tampa Bay area. You see the bay here. The Ian word made landfall here. You think about the circulating winds here. You're getting water piled into that bay. Now, if it makes landfall down here, even though it's only a slight change, right? You're getting some winds that are blowing back out into the Gulf. So it's not going to be quite as extreme, but 5 to 8 feet is nothing to sneeze about. Cape Coral, though, Sarasota, Naples, unfortunately, all of these coastal towns, you see Punta Gorda here, right along 75. Unfortunately, this Bay Area is going to be greatly inundated with water. Who knows how far inland? And it's not just going to be the storm surge with this, guys. Because the storm is hanging around for so long, especially for Central and North Florida, the flooding aspect is going to be really, in my opinion, the biggest threat. So before I get to that, though, let me come back. I'm kind of jumping all around, guys. Sorry. Storm surge. Places like Key West, 2 to 4 feet. They're probably starting to see that now as Ian moves to the north. 2 to 4 feet's not crazy, but it is enough to flood some of the coastal areas. 5 to 8 feet across parts of southern Florida. Out towards Tallahassee into the Big Bend. 1 to 4 feet, 4 to 6 feet on the south end of the Big Bend. That's probably likely. Again, most of the wind there will be coming off the coast, which will help greatly. I think most of that surge will probably happen as Ian lifts to the north and you start getting wind sort of piling in there. Now, the Jacksonville area and areas south down the Cape Canaveral is where it gets tricky. Because while you're not having a landfalling hurricane come right into the coast, right? We've seen this before with really Irma. Imagine what happened with Irma. Right, Irma comes up through here, and we're getting flooding in Jacksonville because of the wind field blowing water into the St. John's. That's why you see these storm surge amounts of 4 to 6 to 3 to 5 feet. And downtown Jacksonville is especially susceptible to these sort of western hurricanes driving water in due to the nature of the St. John's River. Now, Jacksonville, I would expect, I don't know if it will be as bad as Irma. It could be. Just looking at the what the expected winds are when it's near Jacksonville, I would expect close to that 5-foot threshold in Jacksonville. I think that's quite likely. If you remember what happened in Irma, Jacksonville saw some of, I think, the worst flooding in city history. It could be another situation like that. And you add on top of the rainfall amounts that are going to fall. We'll get to that here. Let's pull that up. You see here, anywhere from Jacksonville down to essentially Orlando is expecting 10 to 15 inches of rain. I hope you needed water because you're getting it. It's going to rain for almost 3 straight days with this storm. You see areas near Tampa, maybe 15 to 20 inches of rain. Imagine that. That's a lot. That's a lot of water on top of the storm surge. The flooding is going to be. Here's what. Okay, let me try to. Sorry, it's early for me. My brain's working faster than my mouth is. Let's come back to earth here. Because of the amount of rainfall that is going to fall with this system, it does not take a lot of wind to create substantial impacts in terms of trees being blown down and power outages because of that. The more you figure, the more saturated the ground is, right? It's got a little bit more give to it. So if there's more give, you need less force to knock something over. That's essentially how this works. So regardless of whether or not it's a tropical storm near Jacksonville or not, the impacts are going to be power outages, lots of flooding, especially in the Black Creek area along the St. Johns River. Black Creek floods anytime there's a tropical system. It's definitely going to happen with this. The other main threat with this system is especially if you end up in this right front. If you say, let's pause this for a second. So you slice the storm in half, right? You slice it in half this way. This right front quadrant out here, because of sort of the wind profile, actually this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. Take a look at this here. Give it a second here. You can get this in tropical systems quite frequently. These tornadic storms. Let's see if we can see anything here. Yeah, potentially some rotation there. It doesn't look super strong at the moment. Let's rewind a few frames here and see if we can discern where this potential tornado could be. This is going to be just northwest of Miami, off kind of in the middle of nowhere, the Everglades, right along Alligator Alley. Let's go back here and see if we can see anything. Yeah, you can see, right, what we look at for these tropicals, for any tornadic system. When you see these reds and greens, see it's bright reds touching these greens, that's indicative of rotation and potentially a tornado, right? Now, I'm not seeing anything that would suggest that there definitely was a tornado with this, but it's quite possible. Let's see here. This is another product we use. So what you want to look for is in these deep pockets of these purples and red. If you get a pocket of blue and green pop up within that, these blues and greens are fine. These are okay. That means that, yeah, there may have been a very brief tornado. You can see here, see this area right here? That could be indicative that a tornado was lofting debris up in the atmosphere. That's what this looks at. It's possible. Now, these tropical tornadoes do tend to be weak and very, very short-lived. They spin up very quickly and they die very quickly. They're very hard to forecast. And almost every every storm within this right front quadrant has some rotational nature to it. You see it quite often with these tropical systems, especially land. Whenever these storms get on land, the friction sort of helps that a little bit. But these tornadic storms are one of the bigger threats in these tropical systems. And, it's something that's becoming more commonplace to really look at in these tropical systems. But anywhere along the Florida Peninsula over the next few days is quite likely to see a tornado warning at some point. Now, when I say that does not mean you're going to see a tornado. What I'm saying is be alert because it's possible. I wouldn't rule out a single area up the Florida Peninsula for tornadic development over the next 3 days. Now, obviously, if you're Orlando northward today, you don't really need to worry about it. But come tomorrow night, into the next day, that's when you need to worry about it, because you see Ian's all the way down here. And look how far this is those farther away outer bands I was talking about, right? These might have tropical storm force wind gusts. They might. And look at that, already producing tornadoes. This is the secondary big band. Now, the other thing we have to watch for with Ian is the potential for eye wall replacement cycles. I'm not seeing anything indicative of that right now. You can go back to the Key West radar, which the computer's struggling a little bit, so I won't do that. I don't want to. It's going well so far. But those can lead to some fluctuations in strength. Now, let me get to some of these questions here that you guys had. I saw questions about, let's see here. If I remember correctly, we had a question about Key West on the 10th. So not the 10th, the 1st. So luckily for Key West, which is down here, right? Key West is right here. The storm should be well off into North Florida at that point. You could see potentially some moisture flow northward still being pulled from the storm that could lead some rain showers in Key West. However, Key West's impact should dramatically start coming down tonight into tomorrow. Now, does that mean Key West is going to be in great shape? Depends on how today shapes up and how they get through today. I mean, you see they're probably getting these tropical storm force winds. Actually, let's go to the Key West radar here. I'm curious to see what the wind profile looks like. Yeah. So they're definitely getting wind gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour through there potentially. You see the eye of Ian over here. You're looking at 106 knots, which is it's pretty significant stuff you're looking at there in the eye wall. So the strongest winds of Ian are a little bit tucked back to the southeast side of the storm. Those should miss Key West. However, you see these winds out here, these blues, are also very strong, possibly hurricane force winds. Might graze Key West, so they could get some damage from that. But otherwise, Key West looks good for the next, after today really. Had another question about Pensacola. Pensacola should be, I'm not expecting anything for Pensacola. Unless the storm takes a dramatic sort of left turn, which I'm not expecting. Pensacola seems like they could be okay. Maybe you get some influential runaway storm that, shoots itself off in the main circulation. Pensacola should be okay. The worst thing you're going to have to deal with is maybe traffic on the roads from people evacuating 75 to 10. But other than that, Pensacola should be okay. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Let's see. Sorry, folks. I know me looking at the screen is not the content you're here for, but do potentially have some questions to get to. So let's see. All right, no further questions. If that's the case, let me see. Is there anything else I wanted to cover with this? I don't think so. I think this is everything I wanted to cover for now, the important details. However, might make another video tonight. Definitely will make a video tomorrow. So, if you have any more questions, please reach out. Leave them in the comments. I will try to answer them either in the next video or I will respond to your comment directly. This is a pretty serious situation, folks. Pretty strong storm that will be coming into Florida. Now, I'm not saying that to raise panic, but you do need to take this seriously. Anywhere along the Florida Peninsula has potentially damaging impacts from this storm. Now, again, no need to panic. If you live in the Tampa area and you're asked to evacuate, please evacuate. Especially if you're along the coast. If you're inland, sure. If you think your structure is strong enough, you live in a strong, sturdy brick house, not a lot of trees around you, sure, you can hedge your bets on that. But if you're near the coast, please evacuate if told to do so. I know Tampa already evacuated zones 1, or zone A. I think B and C were today. We'll have to see if they evacuate further. I think they probably will. Now, if you live in areas north or south of Tampa or Orlando, be mindful of the traffic. People are going to be taking I-4 to go to the East Coast, I-75 to go north, I-10 to go west. Roads are going to be messy, so make sure you get gas. Don't wait to the last minute if you're going to leave, if you live on the West Coast. Waiting to the last minute it never leads to good things. You'll be stuck in traffic. Something will get forgotten because you're rushing. And if you're not leaving, make sure you have your supplies. This goes for everybody. Have some water in case power goes out. Non-perishable foods. If you have a weather radio, or if you don't have a weather radio, Walmart sells them. Home Depot sells them. Lowe's sells them. I think even Walgreens sells them. It's a good idea to get one. Yeah, it can get annoying at times, hearing the loud alarm going off. But if you fall asleep, and again, this thing is going to be around for 3 days. The impacts, tornadic impacts, possibly, are going to be around for 3 days. You're going to get some sleep at some point, right? But the storm's not going away when you go to sleep. So it's a good idea to potentially get one. I know your phones will go off and all that, but a weather radio is the most reliable thing to use. And I would get batteries for it. You can plug it in, but in case the power goes out, get some batteries and make sure it's all right. Like I said, water, non-perishable foods. If you have a generator, make sure that's filled up. If you see water ponding on roadways, especially in North Florida, Central Florida, do not try to drive through it. Please, every year, us meteorologists come up with this: turn around, don't drown, and nobody listens. And people always get stuck in the water and say, "Oh, well, I drive a Jeep Compass. I thought I could get through it." I don't care. You're not getting through it. Again, remember, especially in coastal areas, right? I mean, it's obviously not going to be like this everywhere. But remember, 9 feet. 9 feet. You think your Honda Civic's getting through 9 feet of water? I didn't think so. Just turn around. You ain't got to get somewhere that important unless you're evacuating. But if the road's blocked, turn around, find another route. Just hunker down, have some food. Try to find ways to not go crazy over the next 3 days. It's going to be a long 3 days. No other way around it. But hey, you get some bonding time with people. It's one positive, right? Always look for the positives in these things. Yeah, guys, I think that's it. Again, yes, this is a serious situation, but follow common sense. Don't do anything a storm chaser would do, and you'll be okay. If you're asked to leave, leave. Again, if you have any further questions, comments, things you want me to sort of go over in the next video, again, I will try to respond to comments directly. Please leave them below. Contact me, and I will do the best I can to get back to everyone. I think that's it, everyone. I know I promised this to be out at 2 p.m. It'll probably be 2:30 by the time this goes up. So I'm sorry. But I guess I'll talk to everyone, if not tonight, definitely tomorrow. All right, everyone. That's it for me. Stay safe.